How much are you willing to sacrifice for greatness? Could you throw away everything for your craft? Is it even worth it? Whiplash explores the question of is greatness worth it without directly answering it. Instead, it shows us the effects different levels of effort have and lets us decide on our own. It is a 2014 film written and directed by Damien Chazelle, which follows Andrew Naiman through his journey to obtain greatness. Andrew is an ambitious young jazz drummer trying to achieve his dreams at an elite music conservatory. Throughout the film, Andrew meets multiple people that challenge his motivations, particularly the film's primary antagonist, the tyrannical Terrence Fletcher. However, every character represents someone Andrew could become and serves as an obstacle to overcome. But before examining the characters, what is greatness? In the family dinner scene, Andrew reveals his idea of success. It is to go down in history as someone to be remembered. However, his path to greatness does not matter. He would rather die young, drunk, and broke, with no friends while being distinguished for his craft, than live to become old, rich, and forgotten. Andrew defines greatness as someone remembered for their skill. Alternatively, Fletcher's definition is based more on grit and perseverance. For him, a great is someone who would never be discouraged and hone their talent to the highest level.
But is there a line? You know, maybe you go too far and you discourage the next Charlie Parker from ever becoming Charlie Parker?
No, man, no. Because the next Charlie Parker would never be discouraged.
To become great, one must push through every challenge, no matter the difficulty, and immortalize themselves by mastering their craft. Now with that definition of greatness, we can move on to the characters that Andrew encounters. Each person represents a different level of determination that he must obtain to become great. Nicole is the person farthest away from Andrew's ideals. She is a typical college student who balances a job and school while still trying to find her place in life. Nicole has no tragic upbringing. She has no troubling circumstances. The only issue she can even mention is that her mom says she has a big chin, which would be unattractive to boys. Nicole is just normal, and Andrew wants to be great. She does not have a plan for the future, while Andrew has clear goals. When Andrew breaks up with her, Nicole justifiably snaps at him for being an asshole, but is mature enough not to hold grudges against him. She moves on and is respectful to him when he calls her months after they have broken up. Nothing is wrong with Nicole. These characteristics are normal for any college student, but for Andrew Naiman, she is just someone who will hold him back from his dream. Like Nicole, Ryan Connolly is just a typical college student. He has friends and a girlfriend, and is all around respectful and friendly. He is also a talented drummer as he was the core player in the Nassau band. Throughout the film, Andrew and Connolly are rivals, with Andrew being the alternate drummer in the Nassau band. Connolly also takes Andrew's spot as the core drummer in the Schaefer Conservatory studio band. Andrew, however, always looks beyond Connolly. He sees Connolly as a stepping stone in his journey, and in the middle of the film, Andrew exhibits these feelings of superiority. Connolly's role is to be competition to push Andrew to become better. Opposition causes people to either give up or motivates them to push themselves to the limit. Andrew is the latter, and the harder he worked, the greater his skills became. Another rival to Andrew is Carl Tanner, but unlike Connolly, he is a direct counterpart to Andrew, as both seem to be on the same path. Both are average-looking white guys who dedicate their time and effort to please their tyrannical band instructor, Terrence Fletcher. However, Tanner is a step up in skill level from Connolly, as he initially was the core drummer in the Schaefer Conservatory studio band. He played all the charts at a high level, and the primary reason the alternate, Andrew Naiman, even became a core player was because Andrew misplaced Tanner's folder in a competition. Tanner was incapable of playing the charts because of a medical condition which required him to need visual cues. Fletcher needed a drummer, and Andrew stepped up and played all the songs by memory, something Tanner could not. Tanner yelled, berated, and belittled Andrew as Fletcher would for losing the folder, but this would be the last time. After Tanner loses his position as the core drummer, he does not ever regain it. Thus, he loses his semblance of power over Andrew. His importance to the ensemble fades as Andrew improves, and his drive for drumming disappears completely after witnessing Andrew's outburst and injuries during the Dunellen competition. The last we hear about Tanner is that he switched to pre-med. Tanner was very similar to Andrew in many aspects, but Tanner's will caused him to become discouraged, while Andrew's will kept him determined even if circumstances changed. Another person discouraged from their initial goal is Andrew's father, Jim Naiman. Jim is someone his son fears becoming. Jim likely aspired to become a writer, but his dream of writing did not pan out, so he had to settle on becoming a high school teacher. Andrew reveals this information during his conversation about his parents with Fletcher, where he first calls his father a writer, only to take it back and say he's a teacher. Jim's wife left him when Andrew was a baby, but that did not stop him from raising his son with love. Jim cared for his son and only wanted what he believed was best for him. However, the problem was that Jim settled on the easy outcomes during life. He gave up on his ambition to become a writer and accepted the change, something diametrically opposed to Andrew's ideology. Jim is a friendly and respectable family man who can be somewhat of a pushover. He may still have feelings of regret that his dream never came to fruition due to his response to Andrew's outbursts during the family dinner. Jim may have been harsh with his words during the dinner scene, but nothing is more important to him in the world than Andrew. He makes sure Fletcher gets punished for what he did to his son. Jim helps Andrew get accustomed to his new living arrangements and tries to bring some normalcy back to his life. However, this is not what Andrew wants. He wants to achieve greatness, and to Andrew, Jim represents mediocrity. The two do not understand each other, and the most direct metaphor for this is during the movie theater scene where Andrew chooses not to eat the raisinets on the popcorn, which are likely a favorite snack to Jim. They disagree on even the little things like snacks, and the scene ends with Jim saying,
I don't understand you.
But the big moments are where their differences show themselves clearly. Andrew values Fletcher's opinion more than Jim's, and by the end, he becomes a father figure. Jim and Andrew could never see eye to eye. This disconnection is apparent during the final performance. Andrew is overcome with freedom and joy for his magnificent performance, while Jim looks at his son with a face of defeat, knowing that he has lost Andrew forever. Before Andrew, however, Fletcher had a student who was like a reflection of Andrew. That student was Sean Casey. Like Andrew, Fletcher first saw Sean working in a practice room. He struggled in Schaefer and barely squeaked by, but Fletcher saw a drive in him that the faculty did not and put him in studio band. After graduating, Sean became the third trumpet at Lincoln Center, the home of many internationally renowned performing arts organizations, and just 1 year later, he was first. Sean was an exceptional trumpet player and seemed to have a bright future, but in the present time, Fletcher tells the studio band that Sean died in a car accident. However, the explanation that Sean died in a car accident was untrue because, in reality, he hanged himself. Sean suffered from anxiety and depression, which his mother claims started during his tutelage under Fletcher. Sean and Andrew are mirror reflections of each other. Both went down very similar paths, with Sean's fate being a potential future for Andrew. The only significant difference in their musical journeys was how they reacted to Fletcher's extreme and abusive teaching style. Andrew was affected by the constant abuse from Fletcher. However, Andrew did not stay defeated and pushed through the abuse as he strived for greatness. Now, for the most important character in Andrew's journey, Terrence Fletcher. Fletcher is the despotic and abusive band instructor at the Schaefer Conservatory Studio Band. The primary motivation of Fletcher is his desire to find his Charlie Parker, his great. Fletcher's actions are constantly demeaning and harsh, but we do get the reasoning behind his actions. He was there to push people beyond their expectations. He wanted to find someone who would not quit even when forced to their breaking point. This explanation clarifies the action Fletcher made during his tenure at Schaefer. Every decision he made in Schaefer was always to test and push someone. In a practice room alone, Fletcher first meets a drummer named Andrew Neiman and asks him to play a double-time swing. It is one of the only times we hear Andrew's last name pronounced correctly, because from this point on, everyone pronounces his name as Neiman. Fletcher mispronounces his last name on purpose to belittle him and show his dominance. This subtle interaction is just the beginning of the relationship between Fletcher the teacher and Andrew the student. Andrew is incapable of playing the double-time swing, so Fletcher leaves, making Andrew frustrated and disappointed in himself. When Fletcher goes to the Nassau band, he feigns a player search. His true purpose is to see if Andrew took his criticism of his double-time swing and practiced it. When Fletcher told Andrew to go to room B16 at 6 a.m., I believe that he knew Andrew would listen to him and tested Andrew's will to see if he would leave or complain about showing up 3 hours early. He wanted to see if Andrew had that drive. However, Fletcher does not solely focus on Andrew until they reunite at a jazz club. In the famous Out of Tune scene, Fletcher kicks out Metz for being out of tune, but in reality, it was a different trombone player named Erickson who was out of tune. Fletcher told a line that intimidated the entire band and supposedly explained his teaching philosophy, but he directly contradicted it moments later.
Now, either you are deliberately playing out of tune and sabotaging my band, or you don't know you're out of tune, which I'm afraid is even worse.
Erickson did not expose himself for being out of tune, meaning that he either knew he was out of tune and was deliberately sabotaging the band, or he did not know, like Metz, which is even worse, according to Fletcher's statement. However, Fletcher does not care if you are sabotaging his band or did not know you are out of tune. He only cares about if you will keep pushing forward after he verbally abuses you or cuts you. Metz was disposable to Fletcher. He uses Erickson's mistake of being out of tune to both cut Metz and instill fear and motivation in all the other players since they did not want to end up like Metz. During this scene, Fletcher pushed the entire band, not just Andrew. However, he did focus primarily on Andrew, the squeaker, in the iconic Not Quite My Tempo scene. Here, Fletcher first shows his use of violence in his teaching methods and continues to use manipulation and negative reinforcement. He lulls Andrew into a false sense of security by initially complimenting him, but then starts verbally abusing Andrew and even throwing a chair at him after messing up the tempo. I believe, to Fletcher, this is Andrew's first real test. Will he quit, or will he come back better and more determined? In the Overbrook Jazz competition, we see the results of his practice. Here, we have another classic scene in Who Took the Folder. The popular theory is that Fletcher took the folder, which I agree makes the most sense. Tanner tells Andrew to hold onto the drum folder for the second set, but for a brief moment, Andrew sets it down to get a drink, and when he looks back, it is gone. Andrew speculates that a janitor took the folder, but it makes no sense why. It being Fletcher makes the most sense. He has a clear motive. Fletcher predicates his actions on pushing people to their limits, so to him, taking the folder was just another test, not just for Andrew, but also for Tanner. Fletcher knew that Tanner had a medical condition that required him to need sheet music. He also knew from last month's rehearsal that Andrew was incapable of playing the charts. Fletcher was testing both of them to see if Tanner could find a way past his medical condition, or if Andrew had practiced enough to play the charts memorized, or both. The one who passed the test was Andrew, and he became the new core drummer for the Schaefer Conservatory studio band. Now Fletcher sees a more powerful drive in Andrew and focuses on him even more. To push Andrew even further, Fletcher brings in Ryan Connolly, the core drummer from the Nassau band. Fletcher uses Connolly as an incentive for Andrew by giving Connolly an advantage in the new chart and making him the new core drummer. Following Fletcher's desire, Andrew practiced until he earned the part. However, on the trip to the Dunellen competition, Andrew's bus gets a flat tire and he leaves his sticks at the car rental location. The troubles on the road cause him to arrive at 5:11, 11 minutes after the designated call time, so Fletcher says Connolly is playing the part. In reaction to this, Andrew, for the first time, stands up against Fletcher. He talks back to Fletcher and claims that it is his part. Fletcher is surprised at Andrew for being insubordinate, but like normal, still yells at him. Fletcher sees that Andrew is missing his sticks, so he gives Andrew an ultimatum to either by 5:30 be on the drum stool with his drumsticks and not make any mistakes during the performance, or else he will be cut from studio band, or let Connolly play the part. Andrew does not back down and only has 11 minutes until 5:30, so he books it for the car rental location. He gets his sticks, but on the way back to the competition, he gets into a car accident. Still, Andrew is determined to play at the competition and is only 3 blocks away, so he hurries to the stage. Tired and bloodied, Andrew makes it on stage before they start playing, but on the stage, the injuries make the performance too difficult and he cannot keep playing. Fletcher keeps his promise and cuts Andrew. Andrew snaps and tackles Fletcher. While being dragged out, he screams at Fletcher and lets out all his rage and hatred. After the incident at the Dunellen competition, Andrew's dad and a lawyer manage to get Andrew to give a statement against Fletcher that gets him fired. Months pass, and one night, Andrew stumbles into Fletcher at a jazz club. They talk, and Fletcher tells Andrew what his ultimate goal is. He wants to find his Charlie Parker. He believes that a true great can push through anything, but also believes that one can be easily diverted from the path to greatness, which explains the line,
There are no 2 words in the English language more harmful than good job.
A simple compliment can lead to an absolute tragedy in Fletcher's mind. Outside the jazz club, Fletcher invites Andrew to play for the band he is leading for the JVC Jazz Festival. He tells him that the band is playing the studio band set list and the drummer is not cutting it. Fletcher does not know how Andrew will take this request, but sees this as the final test for Andrew. Fletcher wants to see if all the physical and psychological abuse, a car accident, and getting cut will stop Andrew from pursuing his dream. Andrew decides to accept the offer, but on stage, Fletcher tells Andrew that he knew it was him who got him fired. Fletcher introduces the band to the audience and tells the name of the first song. Upswingin', a song completely new to Andrew. He has never played the song before and does not even have the sheet music, so he fumbles through the first song. It is a test for Andrew, but is also a way for Fletcher to get his revenge against Andrew. This competition has many powerful people in the music world in attendance. If you impress them, they could offer you a spot in a world-renowned organization. On the other hand, if you drop the ball, you would have to find a new line of work because they never forget. Fletcher shows a visible pleasure in watching Andrew fail spectacularly, and even gives one final remark as a nail in the coffin.
Yeah, I guess maybe you don't have it.
Andrew leaves the stage defeated, and Fletcher has a look of victory on his face. However, Andrew gets back on stage and takes control of the band. He starts playing Caravan without any cues from Fletcher, and even cues in the bass player. Fletcher starts conducting in reluctance because Andrew has already captured the audience's attention. Fletcher tries to regain control by verbally threatening Andrew, but now, Andrew is unaffected. After the final note of the piece sounds, Andrew continues playing and performs a masterful drum solo for the ages. Fletcher is first confused about what Andrew is doing, then realizes Andrew's blossoming greatness and even assists Andrew in his solo. Before the true final note, the two look at each other with joy, and the final note plays. Together, their dreams have come true. Andrew has become a great, and Fletcher has found his great. Fletcher was never a good man. He was an abusive teacher who could be very spiteful, but he was a man who stood by his convictions without regret. Every character had a role to play in the development of the drumming virtuoso, Andrew Naiman. He started the film as an awkward college student who, from a young age, had a passion for drumming and ended it as a drumming great. Andrew had no friends and seemed to spend his free time in a practice room drumming. That all changed when he met Terrence Fletcher. Fletcher takes him down the path to greatness, but at what cost? Andrew values Fletcher's opinion the most, even more than his father's. Anytime Fletcher gives him an ounce of positive attention, Andrew gains confidence, but anytime he disappoints Fletcher, Andrew feels deeply frustrated. Whenever Andrew went to the movie theater, Andrew could not take his eyes off the floor, but after Fletcher offered him an opportunity to play with his band, Andrew gained the confidence to ask out Nicole. He later shows his feelings of superiority towards his cousins and family who do not understand him, after Fletcher makes him the new core drummer for the Schaefer Conservatory studio band. However, after every failure, we get shown that he bunkers himself in a practice room and works himself to the limit. His personality also shifts to a more angry and self-centered person. He first, as mentioned, believes he is better than his cousins and acts condescending towards them, then breaks up with Nicole in the most arrogant and egotistical way, and lastly, his way of speaking towards the other musician becomes very aggressive and self-conceited. In addition to his personality changing, Andrew purposely isolates himself from others. He pushes his relatives, his girlfriend, and even his father away. By the end, the only person he still seems to value is Fletcher, but their relationship is far from healthy. Their toxicity leads to the development of a great, but at the cost of everything. Andrew has pushed everyone away and has become a different person entirely. He cannot have a normal life anymore, and though completely satisfying, I do not believe it is a happy ending. Both sides have achieved their dreams, but are battered people with forever changed reputations, especially Andrew. The director, Damien Chazelle, has given his insight to what happens to Andrew and Fletcher after the film ends. I think there's a certain amount of damage that will always have been done. Fletcher will always think he won, and Andrew will be a sad, empty shell of a person and will die in his 30s of a drug overdose. I have a very dark view of where it goes. These two will never be friends, but they have got what they dreamed for. Andrew had to sacrifice all his relationships and more, but this is the price for greatness. Whiplash is about a drummer pursuing greatness just as much as it is a story between a teacher and a student. Andrew and Fletcher's relationship is at the heart of this film. Their conflict drives the story forward and is pivotal to the central theme, which is the pursuit of greatness. That takes us back to the question at the beginning of this video. How much are you willing to sacrifice for greatness? Most people can cast aside little things like days or weeks to grind, but when it comes to losing things like their families or previous mindset, that is where the difficulty lies. Achieving greatness is not easy. Only one character accomplishes it in the film, Andrew Naiman. He was willing to go through all the sacrifices required. At the same time, he lost many things others could never give up, like family. That is the price many of us would not be able to pay. Greatness requires complete dedication, which all depends on our values in life. But for the film, one thing is clear. Andrew Neiman had the drive for greatness and was willing to sacrifice absolutely everything. Thanks for watching, and until we meet again.